One day, something changes. Your manager does not respond the same way anymore. A meeting invite goes out without your name on it. A simple email suddenly has people copied on it. Nobody says anything openly, but you can feel that the atmosphere is no longer the same. And even though, at first, it feels like paranoia, maybe it is not. When a company wants you out, it often does not begin with a meeting with HR. It begins with small changes that seem isolated. An email with someone copied, a meeting you are no longer invited to, a vague comment about your attitude. When several of these signs appear together, maybe you are not imagining the problem. Maybe the company has already started building a story about you. And once a story settles in, it becomes much easier to justify a decision later. The most dangerous part is that this process rarely looks obvious while it is happening. It does not show up as a direct accusation. It shows up as small changes you can explain in 1,000 different ways. More control, more distance, more formality, more questions, less access. That is why so many people react too late. Because each sign on its own looks small. But together, they start telling a story you no longer control. There are 7 concrete signs that this process has already begun. And if you learn to read them in time, you can stop reacting late and start protecting your position with more clarity. Not so you live in fear, but so you stop calling something an overreaction when it may already be information. Sign 1. Suddenly, everything needs to be in writing. There was a time when things were handled with a conversation. A quick exchange in the hallway, a short message, an agreement that worked because there was trust. Now everything is different. There are emails where there used to be conversations. There are meeting notes where there used to be verbal agreements. There are people copied who had nothing to do with the topic. The point is not just that everything is now being documented. The point is the shift in intention. Before, documentation helped the work move forward. Now it seems designed to protect someone from what may come later. Healthy documentation organizes the work. Defensive documentation exists to justify a conclusion no one has said out loud yet. When everything starts being documented in a way that was never necessary before, sometimes they are not organizing the work better. Sometimes they are preparing an official version, and that version has an audience you have not been introduced to yet. When documentation stops serving the work and starts serving a story, the dynamic has already changed. Sign 2. What used to be a strength is now being framed as a flaw. Before, your autonomy was initiative. Now it is lack of alignment. Before, your speed was efficiency. Now it is carelessness. Before, your questions showed commitment. Now they look like resistance. Before, telling the truth was transparency. Now it looks like a lack of diplomacy. That shift hurts because it attacks the very things that once made you valuable. They are not criticizing something new. They are taking your own strengths and giving them a different name. And when a strength receives a negative label, you start doubting yourself. You wonder if you were always like this, if you simply did not see it before, if maybe the problem really was you. And the most disorienting part is that you did not change. You are still doing the same things you have always done, but the interpretation of those things changed. Sometimes your behavior did not change. The reading they want to give it changed. And that is a huge difference, because it means the problem is not necessarily what you are doing. It is the story being built around what you are doing. Sign 3. Conversations start having witnesses. Before, a conversation was between 2 people. A direct email, a reply, a normal dynamic. Now that same conversation has an audience. Someone from HR is copied. Another leader is copied. Someone from an area that has nothing to do with the topic is suddenly included. Before, your manager replied directly to you. Now they reply with other people copied. It can also happen in meetings that used to be simple and now include unexpected participants. A conversation that should be operational suddenly includes someone from leadership. A small issue starts being treated with disproportionate formality, and you notice that you are no longer speaking only with your manager. You are speaking in front of an audience. The email may be about an unimportant deliverable, but the people copied on it give it a different weight. It stops feeling like communication. It starts looking like evidence. When a simple conversation starts having an audience, someone has already started treating that relationship as something that needs witnesses, and you still do not know why. And when a relationship needs witnesses, trust is no longer at the center of the conversation. Sign 4. Vague criticism appears, and you can never clarify it. The first 3 signs are signs of preparation. The ones that come next are signs of active construction. Your attitude, your tone, your energy, your alignment, your posture. These phrases have something in common. They are impossible to refute. They do not say when. They do not give a concrete example. They do not identify who made the comments or in what context. And that vagueness is not an accident. Vagueness is useful because it forces you to defend yourself against something nobody has defined. Anything you say in your defense can be reinterpreted as more evidence of the problem. If you ask what it means exactly, you may look difficult. If you accept it without questioning it, you validate a narrative that does not match reality. When vague feedback appears repeatedly and systematically, it stops looking like a communication problem. It starts looking like part of a strategy. That is why, when you receive vague criticism, the right move is not to defend yourself immediately. It is to ask for concrete examples, specific dates, and observable behaviors. What nobody can define clearly, you cannot correct clearly either. Sign 5. You are removed from important conversations. You do not need to receive an explicit exclusion for this to be real. First, there is a meeting you use to always be invited to, and this time you are not. Then another one. Then you start finding out about decisions that have already been made, conversations that have already happened, directions that have already been defined, all without your participation. Before, they asked for your opinion before deciding. Now they inform you of the decision after it is already closed. You become absent from decisions that used to depend on your judgment. That exclusion also has a psychological effect. It forces you to chase information that used to come naturally. You start working with less context, responding later, appearing less prepared. And the dangerous part is that this lack of context, created by other people, starts looking like your failure. And later, that same situation can be used as proof that you are no longer as involved as you used to be. The mechanism is precise. First, they remove you from the conversation. Then they say you did not participate. What looks like disorganization often has a much more specific function. Exclusion comes before the narrative. And when that narrative appears, it sounds logical to anyone who did not see the part that came before. The part where they removed your context before accusing you of not being present. Sign 6. Your good years stop existing. There were years when you were reliable. Years when you delivered. When you solved problems. When you showed up in moments that mattered. That happened. It was recognized. And suddenly, in current conversations, it is as if it never happened at all. This is especially unfair, because a career is not built on one difficult month or one imperfect deliverable. It is built on years of consistency. But when someone wants to change the perception of you, they do not need to lie about everything. Sometimes all they need to do is select only the moments that serve them and leave the rest outside the frame. They do not need to invent a completely false version. Sometimes they only need to tell an incomplete one. And an incomplete version can be just as damaging as a lie, because it keeps enough fragments of truth to sound convincing. Only the most recent mistakes are mentioned, the latest friction, the last situations that did not go perfectly. A narrative is built not only with what they repeat about you, but also with what they decide to erase. The positive past that disappears from the conversation did not disappear by accident. Someone chose not to include it in the story they are telling. Sign 7. You start having to prove the obvious. You reach the point where you save everything. The emails you answered, the deliverables with dates, the messages confirming that you warned them, delivered, followed through, and did what you were supposed to do. You start building your own file because you feel that, at any moment, someone may question something that should be obvious. That is one of the clearest signs that the trust in that relationship has broken down. When you start working while thinking about how to prove every step, your energy no longer goes only into the work. it also goes into your defense. You are no longer just delivering results. You are trying to protect yourself from the way those results may be interpreted. The most exhausting part of that position is that it has no end. Because when you have to prove every day that you are not the problem, maybe someone has already decided to treat you as if you are. When doing good work is no longer enough, and you also need to defend every step, the problem is no longer just the work. It has become survival. At that point, working harder will not fix it. You need to organize evidence, choose your words carefully, and think strategically before responding from exhaustion. Because responding while exhausted can give more material to the story they are trying to build. If you recognized one or two signs in isolation, do not panic. Work environments have tension. Not every change is a campaign against you. But if you recognized several signs, in sequence, starting from a specific moment, do not treat your intuition as an exaggeration. Observe. Document dates, save conversations, organize your history before someone else organizes it for you. If this content helped you see more clearly something you were living through but could not name, leave a like so this video can reach someone else who is still calling a warning sign an overreaction. And if you have not subscribed yet, this is the moment. Here, you will keep learning how to read the invisible rules of work before they are used against you. This is not about living suspicious of everything. It is about recognizing when several signs start forming a pattern. Because when a company starts writing a story about you, the worst thing you can do is show up late to your own defense.